Well, thanks for your patience on this rather lengthy chapter. Last section, critical thinking. A person asking questions can be described as doing what psychologists and other people call critical thinkers. Many definitions of critical thinking exist. Some have called it reflective thinking, etc. Do we distinguish between reflective thought and other kinds of thought, random ideas, rote recall, and beliefs for which a person has no evidence? Another psychologist, Wertheimer, presented several examples that illustrate critical thinking well. One concerns learning how to find the area of a parallelogram that you might remember from geometry. One way to teach someone how to do this is by teaching a formula such as the familiar one from high school: area equals base times height, or altitude as they say in Canada. So here are a couple of those figures. I love when it won't move. That's awesome. So you can see on C, area equals the base times the height. But one of the things that it wants you to recognize is that C and B are equivalent. And I'm sorry that it's a bit warped here, but you can see a little bit better there. C and B are exactly equivalent. And I just moved the triangle over to complete the rectangle for C. So consider that parallelogram, noting that the shaded area, suppose this area is removed from the parallelogram and added to the other side. The transformation creates a familiar and simple geometric object, the rectangle. And the formula, of course, is always base times height, as they call it here in the United States. I've never seen altitude before. So notice that transformation has added exactly the area to the right side that was subtracted from the left, and as a result, the total area has not changed, but we can relate to it better. So that's this idea of critical thinking. Basically, I'm engaging in a transformation that makes something even more visualizable, if you'll accept that term, which is kind of a weird term. Now, here's another example of critical thinking for an argument. And you'll notice that each sentence in some way presents an objection to the previous one. The law wants people to return bottles for 5 cents instead of littering them. But I don't think 5 cents is enough to get people to bother. But wait, isn't just 5 cents? It isn't just 5 cents at a time, because people can accumulate many bottles or bags of cans in their basements and still take them back all at once, so they probably would do that. On the other hand, those probably aren't the bottles and cans that get littered anyway. It's the people out on picnic tables or kids hanging out on the street and parks that litter bottles and cans, and they wouldn't bother to return them. But somebody else might. So what is going on here is that the person is bouncing back and forth in his or her head on the merits of returning bottles and whether it's worth the 5 cents. So according to Perkins and other researchers, good thinking requires a large knowledge base and some means of using it efficiently, but it also requires the kind of objection raising just illustrated, showing thinkers actively try to question themselves and require constructing examples and counterexamples with respect to their conclusions. What often hampers critical thinking is a kind of mental laziness, stopping when you think you get any answer at all. So an uncritical thinking reasoner, somebody that's not engaging in critical thinking, would say, well, it'd be nice to try to reduce litter, but 5 cents won't motivate people, so it won't work, and then that's it. You just leave it right there. You know, I got to tell you, speaking of critical thinking, something happened in California just this past Monday, April 1st, 2024, that kind of shocked me. The fast food minimum wage, which was already very high out there at $16, went to $20 overnight between March 31st and April 1st. And people reflexively assumed, as I do, kinda, that that's going to result in what they call disemployment. In other words, employers will hire fewer people specifically because the wage is so high. And someone else produced an argument that I hadn't considered before. And that is that the wage is so high that it'll stabilize their workforce. Fewer people will quit. They'll stay on longer, get better at their jobs, and the businesses will be more profitable. They'll do a better job at serving customers, and the customers will pay a little bit more for the product. It's hard to say. $20 sounds like a lot. I'm not so sure that stabilization will compensate for the extreme increase in wages overnight. But I'll give myself a little credit for critical thinking, is that I have softened my stance on that a little. I thought from 16 to 20 was a crazy jump. that it's going to cause people to be unemployed. But I have to admit this other way of presenting the facts, suggesting that it will stabilize employment and people will stay on the jobs longer and get better at their jobs, was a compelling point to me. And I'll tell you, I happen to know that that's true at colleges. The really wealthy colleges, the private schools, many of which you've never heard of, can retain faculty for decades. I was at Colorado College 20 years ago, in 2004, and no one has left that college since 2004 that was in the psychology department. All the employees that were back then in their late 30s and early 40s are now in their late 50s and early 60s because it's such an incredibly generous pay package there. They make a lot of money. So there is something to be said for stabilization. And if you see somebody going back and forth in their thinking, presenting both sides, I can see how you would say that. I can see where you'd present this argument. That's a suggestion that they're thinking pretty deeply about something.